What is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on Issues of Faith. We are talking today about a major issue, about the nation's largest Protestant denomination, the Southern Baptist Convention, and some of the issues that denomination has been facing, and really how it relates to all churches now. And I wanted an objective point of view on all of this, so I'm so happy that we have with us Bob Smietana. He's an award-winning religious reporter, editor, and author. He reports now for the Religion News Service, and you may remember him, he also used to report for the Tennessean. So Bob, thank you so much for being with us.
Glad to be here. So
I've read the Southern Baptist Convention is at a crossroads. Why is that the case? And I kind of want to give people, a 30,000-foot overview of what's going on. But why would it be written that the Southern Baptist Convention is at a crossroads?
Sure. Well, a couple things are going on. One is that religion in America is at a crossroads. It's on decline. There are fewer people who identify as religion, fewer people who are members of congregations. Lots of denominations are seeing declining attendance, membership. So that's the kind of broader picture going on. And the Southern Baptist Convention had long been growing, and in the last, since 2006, they've lost about 2 million members. So that's kind of the larger picture of pressure. And then we have the general polarization of the country, where people are arguing over politics and race and gender roles and who should be in charge and how what kind of policies we should have, abortion, as we saw at the Supreme Court today. So all those things are going on kind of in the background. In the SBC in particular, there's a couple things happening. One is arguments over race. There was a big argument over critical race theory, which is something people may have heard of, and whether it's being taught in the seminaries and discussed by pastors. There's an issue of sexual abuse. There has been some allegations. There was a big report several years ago about a number of cases of sexual abuse, and so there's arguments and concerns over how's the convention responding to that. And then the third thing that's going on is sort of who should lead the group forward and who can help them find their way out of the kind of doldrums they're in. And what we really have is one group of conservatives who used to be in charge fighting against another group of really conservative people, some of whom are younger, who are now in charge. And they're fighting over who should be in charge and who should kind of steer the ship forward.
Is there, we've seen like with the Methodist Church and other denominations, talks of splitting. Is that a possibility here? Does it splinter off, or what about that?
There's certainly a possibility of splinter. So there's a group called the Conservative Baptist Network of the Southern Baptist Convention. So it's a little bit of a misnomer because every Southern Baptist is conservative. But there is a disagreement over people who are, I suppose you would say, very conservative and very, very conservative. And so there could be some splintering over that. There was an interesting occurrence at their annual meeting. So their annual meeting usually draws maybe, less than 10,000 people. Well, this one drew close to 20,000 people this summer in Nashville. And there was a very hotly contested race between a candidate from each party, one who was from the Conservative Baptist Network, one who was not. And the race was decided by less than 500 votes.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very close thing. So there's lots of divides. And I think there's lots of mistrust of leadership as well. But I think you could have a group that splits off. You could have kind of continued fighting. You could have just a series of contested annual meetings where the kind of political infighting overshadows any kind of planning to go forward.
Since that new leader was put in place, he won with such a close margin. Has he been successful at getting some things done, or has he run into one sort of...
He sort of run into one kind of problem. Some of it was self-inflicted. It turned out he had preached some sermons where he borrowed material from a friend, and the friend gave him permission, but he didn't tell his congregation So that caused kind of a sermon gate, they call it. It's a plagiarism. I don't know if scandal is the right word, but it's been a controversy. I think then over social media, there's just been fighting. One thing that was really interesting that happened at the meeting is because of the concern of about sexual abuse, the kind of local church delegates, they call them messengers. They voted to hire an outside group to investigate how their office in Nashville, what's called the Executive Committee, which handles the business of the convention during between annual meetings, has handled the issue of sexual abuse. So they vote, and they overrule the denomination's leaders to have an independent investigation. So then that goes to the executive committee for them to talk about funding and how the investigation would go forward. Well, there was a huge fight in that place between, again, these two parties. One group who said there wasn't a sexual abuse problem, one group who didn't want to give up sort of be as transparent as possible. You know, so really one group wanted to control the outcome of the investigation, how much would be shared. One group wanted to be totally transparent. So there's been ongoing fighting, and it's not clear it's going to end anytime soon.
And that's a major one. So you list three, and that's a big one. Is this sexual abuse allegation? Obviously, we've heard of that with the Catholic Church. You mentioned there was a report about this. I believe it was in 2019, maybe in a Houston newspaper, right? How significant? I mean, are there people that say there's really not much to this? Are there others that say it's on the same level as the Catholic Church? I mean, so what are we talking about when we say sexual abuse allegations?
So the Houston Chronicle found, I think, 700 cases of sexual abuse over 20 years, which is, you know, not as much as in the Catholic Church, is still pretty significant. And I think what it's really made. Here's what's happened. The Southern Baptist Convention is different than the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, the bishop has control. They tell which priest goes to which church, and they move people around. They have control over the priest. The convention itself doesn't have control over the ministers. Each church picks their own minister. So what has happened is that if there's been abuse, the denomination as a whole has said it's terrible. It's not our problem. We can't prevent it. We can't control them. We can't do anything about this. And so I think that has become less, that's led to some, I think, kind of disregard of victims, some resistance to whatever changes they could do. I think that answer is no longer acceptable for especially younger church leaders who say, wait, we should do everything we can to, even though we don't control pastors, we should do everything we can to make sure that people who are abused are treated well, that we root this out from our churches. So that's one of the things going on. So it's not the Catholic Church level, but I think there are concerns that if they do more and are more transparent, that will lead to more lawsuits and cost them money. But it's not in the same level because the institutions are just so different.
That's very interesting, and that's an important sort of thing to note. And I saw this quote from someone, Krista Brown. She's a sexual abuse survivor and a critic. She said if the SBC winds up needing to sell nearly all its assets for the sake of providing reparations and restitution to those it has harmed, then that would be for the good. Is there any possibility something on that large a scale could happen?
I mean, you never know with courts. It's harder because the connection is hard. So what you saw in the Catholic Church, again, the bishop would know that a priest was abusive. They would move them to another place. They would overlook it. They kept all the records of abuse. You don't have that same kind of institutional knowledge. You may find some in this abuse, but this abuse task investigation right now is just look at how did leaders respond to survivors, and did they resist things? So I don't know. I mean, no one can tell. They don't have the same kind of, and each different group owns, every church owns their own building. Every seminary owns itself, which is different, than in a Catholic parish. All the parishes are owned by the diocese. So the diocese get sued, those buildings could get sold to pay for restitutions. There's no way, for example, to say like First Baptist downtown, if the Southern Baptist Convention got sued, there's no way that the suit could claim that the property of First Baptist should be sold to pay for restitution.
Right.
There's no
Okay.
right.
Very interesting. The other issue, tensions around race. It's not unique to the Southern Baptist Convention, but what's happening there? You mentioned critical race theory. How significant are the tensions around race? What about that?
This is a pretty significant tension. So what's happening so the Southern Baptist Convention was formed around slavery, right? They split up around the time of the Civil War. They split from Northern Baptists over the issue of slavery. The Northern Baptists wanted to say that if you were a missionary, you couldn't own slaves. And the Southern Baptists said, well, no, you should be able to own slaves and still be a missionary. And the Southern Baptist Convention was pro-slavery. It was also pro-Jim Crow because it was in the South. And so in recent years, they have taken a lot of steps. They've been a lot more Black churches, Hispanic churches, Asian American churches. They've apologized for the past. They have tried to move forward. This critical race theory argument, which is at school boards and churches, has undone a lot of that because you had a number of Black pastors who joined the convention thinking this is different. And then you had the head of all the seminaries say that, well, critical race theory is liberal and it's incompatible with our faith. And so I think you had this pushback to say that discussions of race and kind of that were outside of just personal racism are political and liberal and have nothing to do with Jesus. And so then you had a bunch of Black pastors leave who would come in and say, well, that you're the same old Southern Baptist. You don't care about race.
Wow. Okay, we have to take a break, and then I want to ask some looking forward questions. What are you going to be following as it relates to the Southern Baptist Convention, and even maybe some other things you're working on? We'll take a break. Be back right after this.